The lamb trade is reaching record heights at sales across Australia, and demand for sheep meat generally is outstripping supply. But the worrying decline in the national flock continues. It's now at its lowest level in more than a century. And while the recent focus on sheep has been all about meat, Australia's wool industry faces new challenges with soft demand in the wake of the global financial crisis and continuing trouble over the controversial mulesing issue.
At Cudal Park in the central west of New South Wales, John Coughlin runs a typical mixed farm, dividing half of his 1,300 hectares for cropping and half for his flock of 5,500 fine wool merinos.
As long as I can justify having wool as opposed to having wheat or canola in that paddock, if I've got sheep in there and they're profitable, they can stand up in their own right up against those other commodities, then I'll continue to have them. I love the fibre, I love wool, but I'm not in love with wool, so they're two different things. If I was in love with wool, I probably wouldn't mind if it wasn't profitable, I'd just have them anyway.
Across Australia, though, the sheep meat trade is where the profit is growing spectacularly. It'll earn about $2.8 billion this year, up from just $500 million 5 years ago.
We are now the premier red meat product of the world. Lamb has repositioned itself. It now has a focus around spring. It has a focus around being the flavour of Australia.
At the recent Y Merino Forum at Dubbo in New South Wales, Meat and Livestock Australia's Research and Development Manager, Dr Alex Ball, told growers that sheep meat was now worth more than wool, and the trend was likely to continue well into the future.
Well, the world markets are actually showing that there is greater demand for Australian sheep meat over the next 3 to 5 years, and in fact we think the demand, both domestic and internationally, looks very good for both lamb and sheep meat. So in that sense, it's a good industry to be in the moment, and in fact we believe that we're going to have to make some pretty significant changes to the sheep meat industry just to meet those domestic and international demand, principally focused on improving carcass weight and reproduction rate.
How much of a problem or a challenge is the declining flock?
Oh, that is a real challenge for us at the moment. The Australian sheep flock's now to around about 70 million, lowest it's been since 1905.
The national flock is expected to at least remain stable for the next couple of years before starting to grow again.
We've got to try and drive that flock back up to about 75 million and importantly drive the ewe number back up to 45 million. If we can do that, we've got the opportunity to be sustainable for at least the sheep meat flock of Australia. One of the critical things is also being able to maintain the components as we go forward, particularly around supply of both sheep for processing and sheep for live export. So in that sense, we have to drive our flock numbers up so we can get at least 10 million sheep going into those markets.
If we didn't have merinos, we wouldn't have an industry. That's number one.
Peter Treeford is the director of Hillside Meats in Western Australia, which has developed the hugely successful Q lamb supply chain. He told the forum that Australia's 40 million merino ewes were the most important element in meeting the growing demand for sheep meat.
The most dominant maternal line in Australia. If you look at Western Australia, 90% of the ewes are merinos, and all our lambs obviously come out of those ewes. The other 10% of the ewes are later breeds, but the merinos have been here for 100 years. They do a fantastic job. They're built for Australian conditions, and with a bit of change to them, we can make them ideal for the meat situation as well.
Do merinos taste as good as crossbreds?
There's all sorts of fallacies, but if they're treated the way they should be, the same as a crossbred, they eat equally as well. It's no good trying to take a merino out of an environment that's not the same as what a crossbred or a terminal sire has been done and expect them to eat as well. But if you put them under the same conditions, no one can tell the difference. And plus the intramuscular fat that's in the merino gives it that little bit of juiciness and flavour. And on top of that, we've just found out with all our research that they're high in zinc and iron, which is a real positive for the merino sheep.
Genetics will be the key, producing bigger-bodied, faster-growing, more fertile sheep, but without sacrificing the wool traits which have been the mainstay of the merino's success.
Definitely, and that's one of the advantages that we've seen both in Merino Select, the national breeding program for merinos, and also the Australian sheep CRC, is the variation for meat traits and the variation for wool traits are high, and importantly, the correlation between those appears to be low. So we can actually select for merinos that have better wool quality traits, such as staple strength and fibre diameter, as well as improving carcass traits and importantly, maintaining eating quality, and that's the key thing for us at the moment.
There's an old saying about merinos: you can only skin them once, but you can shear them many times. Sheep meat may be the flavour of the moment, but wool is still crucial to the bottom line of any merino enterprise. Australian wool production is tipped to remain stable this year and rise by about 3% next year.
Well, we're very keen to make sure that we lift prices, and certainly everything we're focusing on at this time of year is the Northern Hemisphere and rolling out a robust marketing strategy to lift demand. We believe that is the way that we're going to lift prices, and that's what wool growers want to hear. They want more money in their back pocket when their wool check comes around.
Australian Wool Innovation's new Chief Executive Officer, Stuart McCulloch, must convince commercial producers such as John Coghlan that AWI's political infighting is over, that it's committed to selecting a skills-based board, and that its focus is on research and development and promoting wool as the world's premium natural fibre.
The brief that was provided to the marketing agency that we've appointed in London is very much about the clean green elements of wool, and also about the finest, the fine feeling of wool. In fact, the catch cry is no finer feeling.
There's no bad agriculture industries, only badly run agriculture industries. In my opinion, wool is the worst.
AWI's new marketing strategy will shift emphasis this year from the catwalk to shop fronts, piggybacking off retail promotions and launching an ambitious London campaign using the Prince of Wales.
The HRH campaign in the UK and Europe, which is attracting a great deal of attention. Up to 100 retailers are going to participate in that. We're going to have nearly 500 windows profiling our product in October. And in China, we have a similar project supporting the fine-end apparel brands from the UK and Italy that are selling into China. We're seeing great growth in consumption in China. Certainly they're consuming 76% of our wool clipped to manufacture, but of that 76%, roughly 60% is actually staying there and being consumed. So we're seeing them come out of a global financial crisis a lot better than some of the other regions of the world.
China now has the world's second largest economy and an expanding middle class with a growing sense of fashion.
Apple's always had the population and it's always had the climate to suit. It's now got the third trigger point, which is affluence. North America and Europe have always had those three trigger points. They've had them for a long time. But we're seeing countries, some come out of the global financial crisis a bit quicker than others, and certainly China's one of those. And we're going heavily into marketing in that market this year, and a little bit softer in North America. But certainly Europe and the UK is getting a great deal of attention as well.
Retail is a big part of the U.S. economy. About 2/3 of the U.S. gross domestic product comes from just the retail sales.
At Y Merino, US marketing expert Deneen Woodrow told growers America's near $5 trillion retail market was starting to recover from the global financial crisis.
The U.S. imported $3.9 billion worth of wool retail products last year in 2009, as compared to $5.4 billion in 2008.
And what are the predictions so far for this year?
We're starting to see that that's increasing a little bit. Inventories have been reduced to ridiculously low levels, so we're starting to refill that pipeline, and we're seeing that there's trends that'll improve this year. We just don't know how much.
But she says the mulesing issue has the potential to stop any recovery in its tracks. Some leading retailers are now boycotting all Australian wool, and others are requesting ethically produced wool. How much of the mulesing issue is driven by lawyers and corporate social responsibility officers or departments as opposed to customers at the retail level?
The retailers did not bring this issue. It wasn't their issue to bring. They certainly spent a lot of time understanding the social responsibility and the ethical treatment of animals in their products. They absolutely have a priority on that. The specific issue on mulesing has come through other outlets and being raised, hopefully not at the consumer level yet, but they are being raised by outside organisations.
AWI concedes animal rights protest will make some retailers take a hard stand, but it says it's working hard on finding alternatives to mulesing and convincing retailers that non-mulesed wool is available.
We estimate there's something like 20,000 retailers around the world. You know, as I said before, we've got 76% of our wool going to China, of which 60% is actually staying there. And we're not hearing much out of there. But we've got to be aware of the fact that these corporate and social responsibility business units of these retailers are appeased, if you like. And what we've got to make sure of is that that we understand that they want to become better at their job, and we understand that this problem's not going away, and that we've got a R&D strategy that can actually meet the demands that are set by some of these retailers overseas.
Ultimately, genetics will provide the answer to the mulesing issue too, and plain-bodied merinos, such as these soft rolling skin or SRS sheep, are already providing the answer.
The breeding strategy, or the objectives that we undertook, was to select sheep for low primary fibre diameter and high wool fibre density and length on a plain-bodied merino sheep.
Former CSIRO scientist Dr. Jim Watts developed the SRS merino more than a decade ago, but it's been slow to be taken up. You've got about 3,000 flocks using the SRS genetics across Australia. Why aren't there more?
Well, good question. There are 45,000 merino farms in Australia, and yes, 3,000 or more of them are sourcing their genetics from 40 SRS merino studs who breed exactly to prescription. So they get this almost cloned product out there, really good, consistent rams to change people's flocks, to get them out of the mulesing habit, etc. Why isn't it on a lot more farms?
The answer, he says, is a combination of drought, a shift to terminal meat sheep breeds, and a lack of incentive to produce mules-free wool.
Okay. It's a 2.
But commercial producers like John Coghlan are now earning a premium of up to $1.50 a kilogram for non-mulesed wool. He's using precision technology to change his flock to more plain-bodied animals.
In our opinion, the only real alternative is genetics. And it's just like a marathon. It all starts with the first step. So we tried to find out as much as we could to start with of how to go about not mulesing, and then just actually went out and stopped it. And then now we're going through the transformation. It's going to take 5 or 6 years. Yeah, because in my opinion, the long-term future is for a plainer merino, a low-maintenance merino. That's going to be the modern merino.
By 2020, plain-bodied